Hi, so today I wanted to show you something to start off with, and it's this picture. And I'd like you to tell me what you see. Do you see a duck or do you see a rabbit? If you see a rabbit, then see whether you can make the rabbit's ears into a duck's bill. If you see a duck, see whether you can make the duck's beak into the rabbit's ears. And I wanted to start off with this today because I think it's a really lovely way to show how actually sometimes there's more than one way of looking at things. And so for those of you who've already seen this before, you would have already known that this was a two-in-one picture and you might have been able to see that more easily. And that's the great thing about knowing that there's more than one way of looking at things. It means that we can actually start to see things more easily, and then we're more able to make a choice of what we can do. Because actually, if we can think differently, it will affect how we feel. So if we're feeling sad, anxious, or angry, and all of those thoughts are around sadness and anxiety and anger, actually, if we can see a different way of looking at things, that's going to help us to feel better. So today is all about that because it's important for us to be able to uh, take that chance and make a change and take a little bit more control by paying attention to how we are seeing things. So I'm going to ask you a question now. Are you selecting certain pieces of information during your day? Are you sort of taking some things on board and other things on board? The answer is always going to be yes, usually, because whether we do it deliberately or whether we do it automatically, our brain is naturally going to be filtering out and kind of making things a lot simpler for us to understand and to take in so that we're not overwhelmed, because the world is full of so many things. There's a lot to take in outside of us, but also inside of us. So actually, it's a really good thing that our brain is able to do that for us. However, there are times when if we're feeling really bad, anxious, sad, angry, whatever it is, that it might be that we're selecting information that's really only allowing us to feel that way. And in that case, what we want to do is see the bigger picture. And if we can't see the bigger picture and we're getting caught up in that, that's something called a thinking trap. So today I want to see whether you can have a bit of guidance on how to notice if you are getting caught up in any thinking traps. And there are lots of thinking traps out there. I'm just going to go over a couple today. The first is called catastrophizing and the second is called filtering. So the thinking trap of catastrophizing means that we're sort of making things really big and exaggerated and it's the worst outcome. So if you find yourself saying things like this is awful, or this is going to be really bad, or this is the worst thing, or you're imagining now or in the future things are going to be really bad, or you're saying to yourself what if this bad thing happens, then the chances are you're catastrophizing. So what we want to do is to get you to be able to turn that around. And the idea is to notice that if you're making things this big, see whether you can say, okay, well, it might not be this big, but actually how can you make it this big? So asking yourself the question of, rather than the worst thing happening, what's the least worst thing that could happen? So, for example, actually, if we're really feeling fed up and finding it really difficult to be in this lockdown, and we're starting to have thoughts that this is going to go on forever, things are never going to be the same, actually, that's the worst case scenario. The chances are the least worst thing might be that actually things go back to normal fairly quickly or after a period of time, or it might be that a less awful thing is that actually things don't quite go back to normal, but it's not as bad as you think they are. So maybe life is disrupted, it is a bit different. So really, it's just trying to think about different ways of looking at something that could feel really overwhelming and bad and actually doesn't do us any good. And then the second unhelpful thinking trap is something called filtering. So filtering is where we only really focus on the negative stuff, and even when there is some positive stuff around, we manage to turn that into a negative. So it's a bit like having dark sunshades on, where everything seems a lot darker, and even the good stuff. So what we want to do is take off those shades. If we are using our filter, often what we might hear ourselves saying is things like, yeah, but that only happened because, or this is a one-off, that was lucky that that thing happened, that good thing happened, or oh, it will never happen again, or it was only that one time that it happened, or I told you so. Classic, yeah. Oh, I told you so. I knew that was going to happen. It always happens. So when you start to focus on all of those things that confirm how negative things really are, be aware that you might be falling into the filtering, unhelpful thinking trap. And then see whether you can turn it around by actually really focusing on the positives. So it's not that you're making these positives up. Remember, those positives are actually there, but you're just not turning it into a negative, or you're not saying, oh well, it doesn't count. You're noticing them, and that's really important. And then the other thing is that you're going to reduce the negative stuff. So really bring it down to size. So, for example, it might be that we just feel, oh, we've had a really awful day, nothing's really gone right. Maybe the kids were playing up, maybe work didn't go quite so well, maybe the dinner didn't go quite so well, and when we're feeling stressed, all of these things can feel really overwhelming. So what we really want to do is focus on the things that did go well. So, maybe it was 1 minute or a few minutes or a few hours of our time where things weren't so good, but it wasn't the whole day. That's important to recognise. Maybe it was one part of the meal or one part of work or one part of being with the kids that was difficult. In which case, it wasn't the whole thing. So really important to see whether you can bring some of those positives, notice the times when it wasn't so bad. So I hope that that's been helpful for you to kind of get you thinking about different ways of seeing things so that it can actually help you to feel better. And so you can then feel confident to go on and notice if you're being selective in your thoughts that are making you feel worse. Notice if you're falling into any unhelpful thinking traps, and then turn that around.